The tragic incident occurred at the Stade du 3 Avril in Nzérékoré, Guinea's second-largest city, during a football match. Thousands had gathered for the final of a tournament held in honor of military leader Mamadi Doumbouya, an event intended to unite the people, but ending in disaster. Don't forget to like, subscribe. As the match progressed, tensions rose when a controversial red card was awarded to the home team, Nzérékoré, in the 82nd minute. This decision sparked anger among the home fans, leading them to throw stones onto the field in protest against the referee's call. The situation quickly escalated when fans of the visiting Labe team rushed onto the pitch, and the chaos continued to grow as the crowd swelled. Security forces, overwhelmed by the scene, resorted to using tear gas in an attempt to control the situation and disperse the rioting fans. The tear gas spread rapidly, engulfing the stadium and causing panic among spectators. As people scrambled to escape the choking fumes, chaos erupted, with witnesses reporting scenes of people being trampled underfoot, including children and women, as the crowd tried to flee in all directions. A witness recalled the horrifying scene, describing how people collapsed and fell to the ground in the stampede. "It was horrible," they said, visibly shaken. The panic scramble for safety led to a deadly crush, with the stadium ground becoming a scene of unimaginable chaos and fear. In the aftermath, local authorities confirmed that at least 56 people had lost their lives, with many others injured. The exact number of casualties remained uncertain, but the toll was devastating. Among the victims were reportedly children, adding a heartbreaking layer to the tragedy. As the news spread, Guinea's Prime Minister Ba Auri condemned the violence. On social media, he urged the public to remain calm and promised that the government would provide a full report once all details were gathered. But the pain and confusion were palpable across the nation. Former President Alpha Condé weighed in on the tragedy, calling it a stark reminder of the dangers of poor organization. In a statement, Condé criticized the management of the event, highlighting the risks involved in such large gatherings, especially in a country marked by political unrest. The incident sparked widespread outrage and calls for accountability. The National Alliance for Alternation and Democracy, NAAD, an opposition coalition, demanded an investigation into the deaths. They condemned the event as a political tool used to support Doumbouya's controversial agenda. The tournament was part of Doumbouya's efforts to bolster his political standing. Since seizing power in a 2021 coup, the military leader had dissolved numerous political parties and established a firm grip on the nation. Critics argued the event was a dangerous way to promote his political ambitions. The tournament, meant to celebrate football and unity, had turned into a propaganda spectacle. For many, it underscored Doumbouya's increasingly autocratic approach, using state events to further his personal and political goals at the cost of public safety. The history of stadium disasters in Guinea made the tragedy all the more poignant. In 2009, a similar incident in Conakry, the capital, saw over 150 people killed and women brutally assaulted by soldiers. The 2009 tragedy remains a scar on the country's history, and this latest incident evoked painful memories. The government of Guinea, under Doumbouya's leadership, now faces scrutiny over the security measures in place during public events. Critics argue that the lack of preparation and failure to manage large crowds contributed to the devastating consequences of Sunday's match. Reports from witnesses indicated that the stadium was overcrowded, with thousands more spectators than the venue could safely accommodate. The lack of crowd control, combined with a sudden outbreak of violence, created a perfect storm for a deadly crowd crush. Many people attempted to flee the stadium in a state of panic, pushing and shoving in a desperate bid for safety. The overcrowding and confusion made it difficult for anyone to escape the toxic tear gas cloud, and those caught in the stampede had little chance of survival. The chaos intensified as medical teams and first responders struggled to reach the scene. The narrow aisles and packed stands made it nearly impossible for rescue workers to reach the injured in time. The scale of the tragedy was overwhelming for the emergency services. Families, friends, and survivors of the incident were left in shock and grief. The community in Nzérékoré was devastated by the loss of so many lives, especially knowing that children and young people were among those who died. In the days following the tragedy, the atmosphere in Guinea remained tense. There were protests and public outcries demanding justice for the victims and their families. Many questioned the role of the security forces and the organizers in allowing the situation to spiral out of control. Human rights organizations also joined the chorus of voices calling for an investigation. The tragedy highlighted the dangers of unchecked power in the hands of military leaders who have little accountability to the public. The international community expressed concern over Guinea's future. Doumbouya, who had risen to power in a coup, had promised to restore stability to Guinea. However, events like this disaster threatened to undermine his legitimacy, with opponents accusing him of using state events to solidify his hold on power at the expense of public safety. The political implications were immediately felt. Opposition groups in Guinea, particularly critics of Doumbouya's government, seized on the incident to rally support for an investigation. They accused the regime of prioritizing its political interests over the welfare of the people. Amid the chaos, the families of victims were left to cope with overwhelming grief, expressing frustration at the lack of communication from authorities and the slow response. The tragedy raised difficult questions about the role of sports in Guinea's political landscape. Was the tournament genuinely about celebrating football, or was it a vehicle for Doumbouya's regime to consolidate power? The lines between politics and sport in Guinea had blurred tragically. As the investigation into the disaster began, pressure mounted on Doumbouya and his government. Opposition leaders demanded accountability for those responsible for poor security arrangements. They called for a full inquiry into the use of tear gas and the lack of crowd control measures. Meanwhile, the international community, including human rights organizations and foreign governments, condemned the violence and expressed condolences. The tragedy in Nzérékoré served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of people in politically unstable regions where disasters can quickly spiral out of control. Guinea's history of political upheaval added complexity to the situation. Since Doumbouya's coup, the country had struggled to find a stable path forward. The tragedy raised doubts about the future of Guinea and its ability to navigate political challenges safely. On the ground in Nzérékoré, locals struggled to make sense of the horror. For many, it was a day that would haunt them forever. The match, which should have been a celebration, had turned into an avoidable catastrophe. In the midst of mourning, questions arose about preventable steps. Were there adequate preparations for crowd control? Was the use of tear gas necessary? Or was it an excessive response that worsened the situation? The tragedy also sparked a debate about the safety of public events in Guinea, especially when used for propaganda by political leadership. Could future events be held without risking more harm? The nation was forced to confront difficult truths about its current state.